once again, this class is recorded. So to discuss the topic about enterprise, no, enterprise architecture, the SAC architecture, and so on. So of course, I just want to give you some introduction about the topic, no, of Sir Edward. So of course, when we say enterprise architecture, that is a blueprint of permitted structure, a configuration, a functional groupings and interfaces data protocols, logical functionality, integration technology of IT resources, and to support a corporate or organizational business function or mission. So to give us a detailed explanations or discussions about the said topic, please let us all welcome Sir John Edward Alferez. Take it away, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that, Sir Marmelo Abante. My name is John Edward Alferez, and I am currently taking MIT at PLMON. I'm currently working at Phil Guarantee Corporation, GOCC, under the family tree of Department of Finance. So today I will be presenting an overview of the enterprise infrastructure, software architecture, the Zachman framework, and the Open Group framework, or the TOGAF. So enterprise infrastructure. So what is an enterprise? It is any collection of corporate or institutional tasks supporting functional entities that have a set of common goals or a single mandate. The enterprise technology and infrastructure refers to the concept of information technology where resources and data are shared across an enterprise. The term enterprise minimally means across a sponsor entire organization like corporate versus department level, but it can just as easily as a cross-organizational such as a multi-agency. So enterprise IT infrastructures refers to the composite hardware, software, network resources, and services required for the existence, operation, and management of an enterprise IT environment. It allows an organization to deliver IT solutions and services to its employees, partners, and or customers, and is usually internal to an organization and deployed within own facilities. IT infrastructure consists of all components that play a role in overall IT and IT-enabled operations. It can be used for internal business operations or developing customer IT or business solutions. So typically, an IT standard infrastructure consists of the following components. So hardwares, these are the servers, computers, data centers, switches, hubs and routers, and other physical equipment or appliance. Software, so enterprise resource planning, so mostly mga ERP, mga examples and are mga SAP and Oracle, yung mga EBS, Business Suite. So customer relationship management, mga CRM, productivity applications, and more. For the network, so network enablement, internet connectivity, firewall and security. So yung mga firewalls, load balancers, yung mga examples noon. So middleware, ito yung mga human users such as network administrators, developers, designers, and end users with access to any IT appliance or services are also part of an IT infrastructure, specifically with the advent of user-centric IT service development. So this is an example of an enterprise network. So what is an enterprise architecture? So an enterprise architecture focuses on a human element and the way to architect and plan the enterprise to have the best human performance and output. An enterprise architecture is a blueprint of a permitted structure, configuration, functional groupings, interfaces, data and protocols, logical functionality, integration, and technology of IT resources to support a corporate or organizational business function or mission. So EA or enterprise architecture is all about designing business infrastructures and organization structure based on vision, strategic intent, and function. It started as a means to manage the growing complexity of IT system but has now since grown to include information about the business architecture itself. Enterprise architecture makes sure there's a plan and that the metaphorical bricks are laid at random. So sabi nga ni Sir, parang blueprint ang enterprise architecture. So yung goals of enterprise architecture is to provide the framework, tools, and perspective to take a startup or business from its current state to its target state. So enterprise are a complex and dynamic system subject to variability. The model is always evolving and therefore the EA planning and framework must be iterative and dynamic. So, ito yung sample ng enterprise architecture framework. So, kung makikita nyo, yung business model nasa taas. So, this includes the business direction, stakeholders, and processes. And then at the middle, makikita nyo yung information system architecture. So, nandyan po yung data architecture, yung data model, information flows. Yung nasa application architecture naman, andun yung application tsaka yung mga application integration. And then at the bottom, yung technical architecture natin. So, nandyan yung mga application technology, server technology, network communications, platform or operating system, database system, and mga security technologies. Now, software architecture. So, the software architecture of a program or computing system is a depiction of system that aids in understanding how the system will behave. System architecture serves as a blueprint for both the system and the project developing it, defining the work assignments that must be carried out by design and implementation teams. The architecture is a primary carrier of system qualities such as performance, modifiability, and security, none of which can be achieved without unifying architectural vision. Architecture is an artifact for early analysis to make sure that a design approach will yield an acceptable system. By building an effective architecture, you can identify design, risk, and mitigate them early in the development process. So, ito po yung simple diagram lang nung software architecture. As you can see, andun sa taas, yung para dun sa implementation and evolve. Yung nasa baba po para sa satisfy. So, ang meaning po nito is, let's start from the business and mission goals. So, going to design, it will be put into the architecture. And then after the architecture, it will be implemented into the system. So, to satisfy, the system must be conformed with the architecture, and the architecture will have to satisfy what the business and the mission goals are. So, ganyan lang po yung pagkakaintindi ko sa software architecture, sir. If meron pong comment or any suggestion, please feel free to speak up. Okay lang po yan. So, next is the Zachman framework. So, the Zachman framework is an enterprise ontology and is a fundamental structure of enterprise architecture, which provides a way of viewing an enterprise and its information systems from different perspectives and showing how the components of an enterprise are related. It has been widely used approach for developing or documenting an enterprise-wide architecture. So the main goal for this framework was to use logical constructs to address the management for ever-increasing complexity of information systems within the organization. So here is an example of a Zachman framework diagram. So sa Zachman, meron siyang iba't ibang different versions na. So itong nandito ngayon, currently is a 1987 framework. So it's a two-dimensional matrix representing the viewpoints on the y-axis. So kung makikita niyo po yung sa y-axis niya, so may scope, yung contextual planner niya, so yung business model, conceptual owner, yung system model, logical designer, technology model, physical builder. So detailed representations is yung subcontractor and yung functioning enterprise niya. And yung views niya is on the y-axis. So examples neto, paano gamitin is kung why, so motivation for developing an integrated system in DCU. So yung how, imagine that how is integration, kung paano mag-work, integration kung how it will work, where and the areas that is the system may work. So dun po sa y-axis, may kita niyo yung uh, data is a what, function is on how, network is on where, people is who, time is when, and motivation is why. So this is I've been searching for this or researching for this. So ang pinaka-latest ko nakita is sa 2011 Zachman framework. So kung may kita niyo po medyo complicated na siya in regards doon sa Zachman framework ng 1987. So may mga different iterations na rin. I think nasa mga 6 na iterations na yung Zachman framework, and this is the latest that I found currently. So enterprise knowledge defined as ontology as a defined model that organizes structured and unstructured information through entities, their properties, and the way they relate to one another. So the Zachman framework provides a means of classifying an organization's architecture. It is a proactive business tool which can be used to model an organization's existing function, elements, and processes and help manage business change. Sa pagkakaalam ko rin, sir, merong certification na rin ang binibigay yung sa Zachman framework. So, hindi pa lang ako naka-experience or nakapag-apply in the Zachman certification. So the next is TOGAF. So it is the Open Group Architecture Framework. So the Open Group is a vendor-neutral and technology-neutral consortium seeking to enable access to integrated information within and among enterprises based on an open standard and global interoperability. The Open Group had developed the architectural framework known as the TOGAF. So TOGAF is described in a set of documentation and may be used freely by any organization wishing to develop an enterprise architecture for use within that organization. So TOGAF was initially developed in 1995 as a common in field of enterprise architecture by then. Newer versions or models offered improved iterations and theories. Likewise, TOGAF took a lot of inspiration from the U.S. Department of Defense own EAF, called the Technical Architecture Framework for Information Management, or TAFIM for short. Interestingly, the U.S. Department of Defense stopped using the TAFIM within a couple of years of emergence of TOGAF. So, medyo pinalitan na nila yun kasi mas nakita nila mas maganda yung TOGAF nung kahit parang open group to or galing sa open group. So the open group defines the TOGAF as a de facto global standard for enterprise architecture. So the framework is intended to help enterprise organize and address all critical business needs through 4 goals. So yung 4 goals nitong TOGAF is first is ensuring all users from key stakeholders to team members speak the same language. This helps everyone understand the framework, content, and goals in the same way and gets the entire enterprise on the same page, breaking down any communication barriers. The next is avoid being locked in to proprietary solutions for enterprise architecture. As long as the company is using TOGAF internally and not toward commercial purposes, the framework is free. Next is saving time and money and utilizing resources more effectively. And next is achieving demonstrable return on investment. So there are three pillars of TOGAF. So if the four goals are theoretical outcome of using TOGAF, then the three pillars are the way to achieve the goals. These pillars helps create a systematic process to organize and put software technology to use in a structured way that aligns the governance and business objectives. So the first pillar we'll be talking about is the enterprise architecture domains. So this divide the architecture into four key areas. So business architecture, so which defines business strategy and organization, key business process and governance standards. Next is application architecture, which provides a blueprint for deploying individual systems, including the interaction among application systems as well as the relationship to essential business process. The next is data architecture, which documents the structure of logical and physical data assets and any related data management resources. Next is the technical architecture, also known as the technology architecture, which describes the hardware, software, and network infrastructure necessary to support the deployment of mission critical applications. The next pillar is an architectural development model, so ADM. This iterative cycle uses performance engineering to develop an actual enterprise architecture. Importantly, it can be customized to enterprises' needs, so it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Once an architecture is developed, the enterprise can roll it out to all teams or departments in iterative cycles, ensuring minimal errors and further helping the company communicate cohesively. So later on the slides, I will show the TOGAF ADM. So the next pillar is the enterprise continuum. So this classification system tracks architecture solutions on range starting at generic, industry standard options, and including customized enterprise specific solutions. So the basic TOGAF concepts are system, a collection of components organized to accomplish the specific function or set of functions. Next is the architecture, the system's fundamental organization embodied in its components, the relationships to each other and to the environment, and the principles guiding its design and evolution. Architecture description is composed of one or more stakeholders, concerns, viewpoints, views, and models. And next is stakeholders, so people who have a key roles in concerns about the system. For example, the users, developers, and our managers. Uh, Next is concerns, so key interests that are crucially important to the stakeholders in the system and determine the acceptability of the system. Next is view, a representation of a whole system from the perspective of related set of concerns. So this is a diagram of the Open Group Architecture Framework or TOGAF. Uh, Sir Marmelo, I didn't really have experience in TOGAF. So basically, I only have experience in SDLC. So hindi ko po masyado ma-explain yung the Open Group Architecture Framework. So sorry about that. Hindi ko ganun kabisado yung TOGAF eh. So next, this is the uh, uh, TOGAF diagram. So the TOGAF architecture development method, so this is the ADM, forms the core of TOGAF. It is a reliable, proven method for developing an IT architecture that meets the business needs of an organization, utilizing the other elements of TOGAF. Describing in this document, the other architectural assets available to organizations. So, dito po sa diagram niya, makikita niyo po yung 4 iteration cycles. So, there is the architecture context. Inside the architecture context is the preliminary, so my framework and principles. And then next is the architecture vision. And after that, there is the architecture delivery. So under architecture delivery, there is the business architecture, the information system architecture, and the technology architecture. The third is the transition planning. So under the transition planning, there is the opportunities and solution and migration planning. Last is the architecture governance. So under the architecture governance, we have the implementation governance and the architecture change management. So sir, that concludes my presentation in the overview of the enterprise infrastructure, software architecture, the TOGAF framework, and the Zachman framework.
You just stay your presentation, stay in for a while.
Yes sir, no problem.
Okay, so to give you some additional inputs for the topic of Sir Edward, no? The discipline enterprise architecture or the EA actually seeks to generate alignment between an organization electronic information system, human resources, business processes, workplace culture, mission and strategy, and external ecosystem in order to increase the organizational ability to manage complexity, resolve internal conflicts, and adapt proactively to environmental change. Of course, an introduction to the definition, history, organizational role, objectives, benefits, mechanics, and popular implementation of enterprise architecture was discussed already by our presenter. The historical shift from IT-centric to business-centric definition of enterprise architecture is, or of course, along with the difference between hard and soft approaches to enterprise architecture. The unique organizational role of enterprise architecture is highlighted by comparing it with other management discipline and practices. Then, of course, the unique organizational role of the EA is highlighted again, and the creation of alignment is explored as the core mechanism by which enterprise architecture achieve advantageous effects. Actually, we have different kinds of alignment. No? So the history of EA as a generator of alignment, the enterprise architecture's relative effectiveness of creating different types of alignment, of course, and the type of task undertaken by an enterprise architects, the of course, and number of popular enterprise architecture frameworks must also discuss, and the said framework is then a means of discussing elements such as architecture domains, building blocks, views, and landscape that form the core of many enterprise architecture frameworks. The role of modeling languages is documenting EA plans must be addressed also. In light of enterprise architecture adopting EE initiative of the of the organizations may better position themselves to address the new social, economic, and operational realities emerging, of course, technologies such as those relating to social robotics, nanorobotics, artificial life, genetic engineering, neoprosthetic augmentation, and virtual reality. We need uh, to consider that the enterprise architecture is the process used by a business to make explicit representation of enterprise operation and resources rather than relying on explicit notion or understanding in individual manager's heads. Now, so when we say the Zachman enterprise framework, no, as discussed also in by our presenter, the Zachman Enterprise Framework was invented, of course, by John Zachman. That is 1980. Uh, Intended for IBM. And actually, at present, that is up in a public domain. The framework borrows from business design principles in architecture and manufacturing and provides a way of viewing an enterprise and its information system from different perspectives and showing how the components of the enterprise are related. In today's complex business environments, many large organizations have great difficulty responding to change, right? Part of this difficulty is due to a lack of internal understanding of the complex structure and components in different areas of the organization, where legacy information about the business is locked away in the minds of specific employees or business units without being made explicit. The Zachman framework, no, provides a means of classifying an organization's architecture. It is a proactive business tool, no, which can be used to model an organization's existing functions, elements, and processes and help manage business change. The framework draws on Zachman's experience of how change is managed in complex because products such as aeroplanes and buildings, no? Although the frameworks can be used of information system architecture or ISA and is widely adopted by system analysts and database designers, he is actually the owner or the author of this Zachman, no, has stressed that it extends to the entire enterprise architecture and it is not restricted to simply information architecture. Now, the Zachman Enterprise Framework is represented and promoted by the ZIFA, no? Zachman Institute of Framework Advancement Organization. It is not a standard and there are similar enterprise frameworks that have been derived from it, such as I think you are also familiar with Federal Enterprise Architecture Framework or yung FIAP, no? And later on, of course, the TOGAF, no? And the Department of Defense Architecture Framework or the DUDA. The framework actually provide a consistent and systematic way of describing an enterprise and has been employed in many large organizations such as Volkswagen, General Motors, Bank of America, and Health Canada. So what will be the relevance to technical communications of the Zachman framework? Now, so as what we have here, no, the Zachman, no, sa technical communication are closely involved in information design and management. So whether at the level of the user, the designer, the integrator, or the builder. Because traditionally, their role has been associated with the information technology architecture side of an organization. The business analysts are currently the main providers of enterprise architecture services. However, given the depth of business knowledge and information management experience, many technical communicators can offer. Documenting an enterprise architecture is potentially a service that technical communicators with a good level of business understanding could provide. Excuse. Now, the using the Zachman framework for a knowledge management project. No? So it was first introduced to the Zachman Enterprise Architecture in a project to document the architecture, no, processes and technology deployed in the IT department at a large distributed organization. The main task was broader than the traditional technical communicators' role of documenting a specific product or service. It involved managing a broad spectrum of knowledge and finding the most efficient way to capture and store information about the enterprise processes, procedures, systems, application, and of course, people. The first requirement was therefore the need for a suitable framework for organizing the enterprise information. And the Zachman Enterprise Model was suggested as a suitable framework for the project. So, how it works, no? How Zachman Enterprise architecture frameworks work. The easiest way to understand the Zachman Enterprise architecture framework is to view it as a classification scheme. represented visually as a table of matrix with columns and rows. No? As our presenter mentioned, each cell within the matrix provide a unique model or representation of the enterprise. The information in each row of the matrix would be relevant to the particular person in the enterprise viewing. No, so kanina present ni Sir yung what, how, where, who, when, and why. No? So based dun sa ano ni Sir, yan yung diagram ni Sir, no, makikita natin. Sabi nga niya, so we have the data, the functions, the network, the people, the time, and the motivation. This framework offers a set of descriptive representation or models relevant for describing an enterprise. No? So each cell in the table must be aligned with the cell immediately above and below it. So all the cells in each row also must be aligned with each other. Each cell is unique. Combining the cell in one row forms a complete description of the enterprise from that view. So in a matrix column, as I mentioned, we have what, how, where, who, and when. Okay, and why, of course, the motivation. So, of course, in recommending the framework for your organization, no, the Zachman Enterprise Framework can be viewed as a tool for creating knowledge and classifying thinkings and as an aid in analysis and decision making. It is a strategic information as asset that can help shape an organization. So what are the benefits? Readily available documentation for enterprise, ability to unify and integrate business processes and data across the enterprise. No? It increases business agility by lowering the complexity barrier. It reduces solutions delivery time and develop cost by maximizing reuse of enterprise model. And another recommending the by recommending it is also has an ability to create and maintain common vision of future share by both and business IT communities. Now, how about the TOGAF? Okay? So, as discussed by our presenter, no? The open group, okay, the TOGAF, no, is an international vendor and technology. That is a neutral consortium that organization rely on the lead, the development of IT standards, and of course, certification. So maybe you're asking, why do we need to have a certification? Why do it's important for us to have a certification? Of course, will be an advantage for us to have a certification, specifically for TOGAF. Because at present, no, at this time, no, the best and advisable certification for enterprise architecture is the TOGAF. No? So, the TOGAF provides guidance in open environment to enable interoperability and vendor neutrality. No? Membership is open to all enterprise, whether small, medium, and large, anywhere in the world. No? So if you wanted to be a member, so TOGAF is open to all enterprises. Now, the TOGAF, of course, tackling boundaries information flow. So they have, of course, the enterprise architecture for white papers, for standard, for products and service certification, for people and professional certifications. They have also cloud computing, interoperability, portability of applications, real-time and embedded systems, security compliance, identify and risk management, service-oriented architecture, and of course, trusted technology. So, for example, no, why customers join this TOGAF? No, this TOGAF can build relationship with peers in other industries and share knowledge. Same with other organizations, no? Same with other professional organizations. So they can talk to suppliers and non-selling environment. Now, The open group scorecard of the TOGAF, no? They have a professional standard perspectives, no? They have a methodology standard perspective and a software standard perspectives. Wherein the enterprise architecture covered, no, with open skills, architecture knowledge, open CA skills, professional associations, dependability through assuredness, cover the portability, interoperability, manageability, and security. Now, they have also, of course, when it comes to the enterprise of the TOGAF, no, based on the TOGAF, an enterprise for the TOGAF framework is a collection of organizations that share a common set of goals. They have a government agency, they have part of a corporation, and a corporation itself. It covers the large corporation, may comprise multiple enterprises. It may be an extended enterprise including partners, suppliers, and customers. So again, as I mentioned earlier, for the TOGAF architecture, no? So this will be the fundamental organization of something embodied in its components, the relationship each other and the environment, and the principle governing in its design and evolution. So the enterprise architecture under TOGAF, no, it organizing logic for business processes and IT infrastructure, reflecting the integration of standardization, requirements of the firm's operating model. Actually, a conceptual blueprint that defines the structure and operation of an organization. The intent of the enterprise architecture is to determine how an organization can most effectively achieve its current and future objectives. So the architecture types of the TOGAF, they have the business architecture wherein cover the business processes, organization, and people. They have the application architecture, cover the services. They have data architecture for data and information, and they have technology architecture covered hardware, software, and network. Now, excuse. Why enterprise architecture for TOGAF? So, effective management and exploitation of information through IT is a key to business success, right? Again, even you have a good programmer, you have a good system analyst, you are the persons who are good in software and hardware, but still, effective management and exploitation of information through IT is a key to business success because good information management equals competitive advantage. No, current IT systems do not really meet the needs of business for fragmented, duplicated, poorly understood, not responsive to change. Because investment in IT must focus on system maintenance, tactical developments rather than a strategic plan. So, the two key reasons why do we need to have an enterprise architecture is critical to business survival and success. No? Enables manage innovation within the enterprise. So, the pressure to develop enterprise architecture, of course, is the laws and regulations. Especially here in the Philippines, no? More extended enterprises, so more cooperative IT operations, greater publicity to failures, and increase in litigation and audit requirements. And most commonly, especially at present, that the Filipino people are very particular with cybersecurity, data privacy, and so on. So this will be another pressure to develop an enterprise architecture, no? Considering the loss of data privacy, the cybersecurity, and others here in the Philippines. No? Now, what will be the business benefits of enterprise architecture? So maybe if you are the owner of a company, maybe you are asking, no? So what will be the benefits on my business of this enterprise architecture? Number one, it helps an organization achieve its business strategy because faster time to market for new innovation and capabilities. At the same time, it more consistent business processes and information across business unit. And another thing, it is more reliability and security. As business owner, we need to have to consider the less risk, right? Now, another business benefits of enterprise architecture, it has more efficient business operation. It has more efficient IT operations. It is also say based on research that better return on existing investment. It can reduce risk for future investment, faster, simpler, and cheaper procurement using the enterprise architecture. So the importance of the governance. No? So an enterprise architecture is only as good as the decision-making framework that is established around it governance. No? So the governance framework depends on clear authority structure. Again, clear authority structure and the right participants. It is very important. So what do we mean by governance? Of course, the way in which decisions are made. Who is responsible, who is involved, and who is accountable. Which is too important to define and to determine. No? So, what is an architecture framework? So, a conceptual structure used to develop, implement, and sustain an enterprise architecture. It should describe a method for designing target state on the enterprise in terms of asset building blocks and for showing how the building blocks fit together. It should contain a set of tools and provide common vocabulary. It should also include a list of recommended standards and compliant products that can be used to implement the building blocks. The value of a framework is to provide a practical starting point for architectural project. For what? No? To avoid the initial panic when the scale of the task becomes apparent. Of course, systematic, codified common sense. No? Capture what others have found to work in a real life and contains a baseline set of resources for reuse. So a while ago, Sir, of course, provided us an enterprise architecture development method wherein they have a comprehensive general method, a complementary tool not competing with other frameworks, widely adopted in the market, no, tolerable, tailorable to meet an organization and industry needs, available under the free perpetual license, no, the virtual tool and technology neutral open standard. Avoid reinventing the wheel or business IT alignment based in the best practices and possible to participate in the evolution of the said framework.
Sir, may question
So
po.
now, what will be, at present actually, we have TOGAF 9.1. No? That it must be focused on the customer initiative. And this framework is not an architecture because a general framework for developing architecture to meet different business needs, not a one-size-fits-all architecture. Originally based to sa TAFIM. So,
Sir, may
what
question
will
po
be
ko.
the coverage or scope of the TOGAF? So, TOGAF actually emphasizes business goals as architecture drivers and provides a repository of best practices. Include the architectural development method, the, the ADM guidelines and techniques, the TOGAF architecture content framework, the enterprise continuum, the TOGAF reference model, and the capability framework. So, actually, the TOGAF 9 components, they have the ADM guidelines and techniques. No? They have the architectural content framework at the same time. So, The ADM basic principles, no? An iterative method over the whole process between phases and within phases. So each iteration is equal new decisions. So enterprise coverage, level of detail, time horizon, architectural asset reuse like previous ADM iterations, other frameworks and system models, and industry models. The decision basis on competency or competence, resource availability, value accruing to the enterprise. So we need to consider that every phase is validated against the validates the current requirements of the business. So this phase, the preliminary phase of a TOGAF, includes the preparation and initiation activities to create an architecture capability. What will be the coverage of the preliminary phase? We need to understand business environment is too important. High level management commitment, because even you are particularly adapted the TOGAF without the entire or the full support of the management or the commitment of the management, it's too hard for us to implement. But of course, prior to our implementation of TOGAF, we need to provide an agreement on scope. What will be the exact, So it is important for us to define all the scope prior to the application. And it must be approved with agreement with the management. We need to establish, of course, the principles, governance structure, and customization of a TOGAF. Okay? For the architecture vision, we need to initiate one iteration of the architecture process. Again, we need to set scopes, constraint, and what will be the expectation. It required at the start of the every architecture cycle. We need to create the architecture vision, validate business context, and create a statement of architecture work. During our project management subject in undergraduate program, prior to our program development or software development, we need to create a statement of work. So in this case, if your company adopting enterprise architecture, we need also to create a statement of architecture work. So the business architecture, that is the phase B, the fundamental organization of business embodied in its business processes and people. We need to consider the relationship to each other and the environment, the principles governing its design and evolution, and shows how the organization meets its business goals, which is too important. Because if I am the owner of the company, why do I need to have an additional cost if I couldn't meet my business goals? When it comes to business architecture contents, of course, again and again, we need to consider the organization structure, the business goals and objective, the business functions, services, processes, rules, and the correlation of organizations and functions. Now, for the steps, what we're going to do, of course, is to select reference models, viewpoints, and tools. We need to define baseline architecture description. We need to define the target architecture description. Another important thing is to perform gap analysis. Define candidate roadmap components, conduct formal stakeholder review, finalize the architecture, and you need to create an architecture definition documents. Okay? So, for the information system architecture, the fundamental organization of an IT system embodied in the major types of information and application that process them. Now, relationship to each other and the environment and the principle governing its design and evolution. It shows how the IT system meets the business goals of the enterprise. That is during the IS architectures. Then, for data and application, okay, it is usually necessary to address both. Not only the case, depending on the project scope and constraint. It may be developed in either order or in parallel. But of course, Theory suggests data architecture comes first, no? Then practical considerations may mean that starting with application architecture may be more efficient. Actually, there will need to be some iteration to ensure consistency. No? The technology architecture, the fundamental organization of an IT system embodied its hardware, software, and communication technology. We need to look into their relationship to each other and the environment and the principles governing its design and evolutions. Excuse. How about the opportunities and solution? We need to perform initial implementation planning. We need to identify the major implementation projects. We need to determine if an incremental approach is required. If so, define transition architecture. We need to design an approach as what we discussed in our class during undergraduate program. What are the approach? Either make versus buy or versus reuse. Yeah? Gagawa ba kami ng bago? Do we buy or outsource? Or do we reuse? No? Or we could able to adapt COTS or open source. So, during the opportunities and solution, we need to assess the priorities. And, of course, first thing that we need to identify is the dependencies, okay, of different subtasks or subsystem. For the migration planning, no, for work packages and projects identified, we need to consider the cost and benefits analysis and the risk assessment. We need to finalize a detailed implementation and migration plan. In what sense? So for example, in this situation of pandemic, no, we encountered a lot of transition, no, from work from home, no, from 2 days work, 2 days report in the office, then the 3 days is work from home. So if you don't have a risk assessment, so what will happen to your company? That's why, as an IT practitioner, so we need to focus on the implementation and our migration plan. Okay? Now, how about the implementation of governance? That is also another issue in concerns. Now, the most important things that we need to do and to create is to provide architectural oversight for the implementation. We need to devise architecture constraint on implementation projects, govern and manage an architecture contract, monitors implementation work for conformance, and we need to produce a business value realizations. For the architecture change management, we need to provide continual monitoring in change management process. No? We need to ensure that changes to the architecture are managed in a cohesive and architected way. If we are the one who assigned for this task, we need to establish and support the enterprise architecture to provide flexibility to evolve rapidly in response to changes in technology or even in business environment. We need to monitor the business and capacity management. Okay? So, I think that's it for the
Sir, may question ako.
first topic.
Sir? Sir, may question ako.